So we'll go ahead and get started, and as I said, we're going to have a fairly small discussion here, but we have a broader discussion as we have a lot of folks who are dialing in online. So big hello to our distant students, which we have scattered throughout the country, maybe even some internationally, but I think for the most part in the country. So before we go ahead and get started with the program, I just want to do a quick introduction to two folks here. The gentleman in the back taking photos is Tony Harvin, who's our Executive Director for our Office of Alumni Relations for the College of Professional Studies and partner in this event and other events fairly well.
Staff photographer. I sleep pretty well. I can move desks.
You're versatile.
Yes.
And he just got this new camera, so he's testing his ability.
Wow.
So at the end of this, we do have to capture the group and maybe even more. So.
And Tony Marsh, Tony, if you want to come over and wave in front of the camera too, so people can see your face. Broadcasting over here.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, is there a camera in the room? Excuse me.
I remember you, Tony. Yeah. Yeah, I used to be in Carolina.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Can you see me?
Me
Hi, everybody. Hello to my class. Hello to everybody out there. I'm so glad you're joining us streaming today. And if you're anywhere in the D.C. area, come and join us live because we have brownies. So you need to come here for that. Or don't, more for me. Right?
So Tony is the, for those who don't know, Tony is the program director for our paralegal studies program. And
Tony.
pretty much, I think every paralegal in Tennessee.
Three Tonys.
We got the Tony going.
Yeah, Tony.
Lots of Tonys.
So this will be pretty informal this evening. I have my phone here, and the online folks are going to text me questions, and a lot have been sent in advance, so I'm going to go down that list. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get the panelists warmed up here a little bit, and turn things over to you guys, because I know there's a lot of questions, particularly about getting into the federal sector. How do we get in there? What do you guys do, and what's it look like across different agencies? And just got to preface this by saying nobody here is in human resources. So we're going to give you...
We don't know how we got it.
So I'm sure there will be questions about...
4 different paths at least.
Right.
Yeah.
So there will be questions about resume formatting, and I think these individuals can address their own situation, their own circumstances, how they got to where they are. So we'll go ahead and kick things off with introductions, and I have to also note that Ms. Deborah Brown couldn't join us for the discussion from the Department of Labor, but she's more than happy to talk to anybody who's interested in labor. I know there's a few students online who have some questions, and we'll match you up with her if anyone's interested in labor specifically as an agency. So why don't we go ahead and kick things off? If each of you could just kind of give us a sense of your, first of all, introduce your agency, and also the structure of your office. Number of paralegals, number of attorneys, are they all based in that office? Are they scattered through different parts of the country? Then very generally speaking, the roles that you perform in your paralegal role, and then maybe some of the specific niche skills that you've developed in that role. So I'm going to start on this end. Okay. Mary Luceri from Federal Trade Commission.
Hi, my name is Mary Luceri. I'm an honors paralegal. I have 4 years of experience working for the Federal Trade Commission, which is a federal independent law enforcement agency, and their primary focus is on consumer protection and promoting competition. Our office is, all the honors paralegals are grouped together, and we respond to paralegal requests from the attorneys that are throughout the entire agency. So we could work for attorneys that are in different divisions, on different floors, or in the regions. And we have regional offices in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and what they do. And I brought some requests if we want to get down to some specific things to show you what a real day-to-day kind of request is. But an attorney will just say, I need a paralegal to do tagging on concordance or something. And they'll explain it's a rush project or it's a long-term project. And it's a great program because you get to look through this file of paralegal requests and say, oh, I'd like to take that. And then you can email your manager, and there's a manager of the paralegals. And you say, I'm interested in that project. And I'm not sure how that whole thing works, but you'll get an email back that says, okay, go ahead, contact that attorney and tell them you're available. So there's only about 12 to 13 paralegals in the honors paralegal program, which is the program I'm in, but there are some that are in the individual divisions as well. I don't know how many attorneys there are in the Federal Trade Commission, but I think there's like thousands. There's a lot of them, so there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of diverse work.
Great, great, thank you.
So I'm Isabel Otero, and I work for the Justice Department and the Civil Rights Division. And so the Justice Department is a much larger component of the federal agency than the Civil Rights Division, and the Civil Rights Division is set up in different sections that address different parts of civil rights law. And so my office, I've been there for 2 years as a federal paralegal contractor. My company is USIS Labatt, and my office is the Office of Special Counsel for Immigration-Related Unfair Employment Practices, which is as wonky a title as you're going to get. I think it's the longest one in the Civil Rights Division as a whole, and we are also the smallest in the Civil Rights Division. And so our office is supposed to have a political appointee as our head. We've not had one since 2008. Do with that what you will. And we then have a deputy chief, and that is the person who is currently running our office. Under that, there are 3 managing attorneys, 2 of which deal mostly with litigation, 1 of which deals with public education and with policy issues, because the law that created our office specifically in the civil rights legislation, it gave us 2 different missions, one of which is you have to ensure that the public knows about their responsibilities, workers know about their rights, employers know what they're supposed to and not supposed to do, and also you're supposed to enforce the law. So when you do find a violation, we have to then go after it. And under those 3 managing attorneys, we have 13 attorneys, 3 investigators, 3 admin, and just 2 paralegals. And so you can imagine that for a small office with national jurisdiction, 2 paralegals get a lot of work. And we're actually the 2 contractors in the office as well. And so I spend my day somewhere between litigation and policy work, which allows me to do a lot of litigation stuff, and with my language skills, I'm able to do a lot of interviews. I'm able to go out with the attorneys to find witnesses for our cases. But on the other side of that, I can also go and do presentations for workers in person, or do webinars, or teach other agencies about our law, make sure that if we have an agreement with a fair employment agency in Wisconsin, that Wisconsin's people get trained in our law, so that when they find a violation under our statute, they can send that person to us as well, because we sort of have to maximize our reach as best we can, because as you heard, there's a little bit less than 30 people in my office, but it is part of a much larger agency.
My name is Kristen Carr. I am a paralegal for FBI Washington Field Office, the premier law enforcement agency. Just teasing, it's also a premier's. But really, so FBI kind of has a wonky structure, especially in DC. People think the Hoover Building, FBI, that's it. Well, they're kind of, think of them as the upper management, and then we have 56 field offices. Each field office has several resident agencies, and then we have international offices as well. I'm at the Washington field office. I think the field office is the better place to work, because that's where it's operational. That's where the agents are out doing investigations, running and gunning, doing all the cool stuff. So I feel very fortunate to have ended up there. So I work for the Office of Division Counsel. It's 8 different attorneys, one being the Chief Division Counsel. And they are all special agents and attorneys. They support the different divisions within the field office. So they're supporting cyber, counterterrorism, intelligence, criminal, the list goes on. And then under each of those divisions, there are subsects where, they're doing white-collar crime or drugs, or, a specific counter-intel program. So all the attorneys that I work for do various things, and we kind of, on a day-to-day basis, it can change what they need, based on what they need. Big part of what I do is Federal Tort Claims Act. Those are claims that arise out of either car accidents from our agents, or if they are serving a search warrant and there's damage to property, personal injury, that type of thing. We deal with any claims, and then if we can't settle it at our level, any litigation that comes out of those claims. So FBI Washington Field Office covers DC, a little bit of Maryland sometimes. It kind of, the lines are blurred. And then a lot of Northern Virginia, down to almost kind of the Warrenton area. We have 2,000 employees just at the field office. About 1,200 are support, so my side of the house, we have just over 800 agents. And like I said, I can't unfortunately speak to everything that I get to do for them, but it is a lot of fun, and you will see a broad spectrum of things that you get to work on when you work for FBI.
I'm Anthony Gracie. I work with Department of Defense in the Office of General Counsel / Legal Counsel. Our unit, we deal with a lot of the national security issues, which I can't discuss too much of it. So I always joke, I always tell my wife, and my wife says, "How was your day?" I said, "Well, if I tell you what we worked on today, we'd have to kill you." So we deal with, I always say, when I get up in the morning, watch the news, then I'll know how my day.
Yes.
So that's how I know how my day will turn out. And also, like Isabel, I've worked with the Justice Department. I was there from 2004 to 2007. I was in civil rights also in the housing unit. Now there, we did do a lot of travel. I've been to Miami, Alabama, you name it, everywhere, different places. So. You said wrong.
But I get sent to Indiana, Iowa, Missouri farms, and it's hit or miss. Sometimes you're like, it smells like chicken. It's
Yeah.
a whole entire state of wherever I am.
So I'm stationary here. I'm based out of Crystal City, and the Pentagon is where most of us work at. But I'm still a Pentagon employee. I have access to the Pentagon, so I'm there at least twice a week going there. And about my job, like I say, if you like working in espionage and other things, that would be, I would say.
So the question that was submitted by more than one individual, and it's a very blunt question, is how do I get a federal paralegal position? So I'm not going to put you guys on the spot to say, well, here's the formula, or maybe we can write a book about that.
You know the process.
So given that, and seeing that there's, through those intros, we've seen different pathways into a federal paralegal position, can you talk about your own experience, and I think more specifically the onboarding process? So from the time you had submitted your application to the clearance was process, and I realize the folks here on the end might be a longer clearance process to hire process. But can you just generally speak about your own experience transitioning into a federal agency?
Okay, when I first started with federal agency in 2004, I came from municipal government in Philadelphia, and I joined the DOJ. That process went kind of quick. I had, I think it was like February of 2004, I applied for the position, and it's either like, I'm trying to remember. Oh, I remember. It was around when President Reagan died. I think that was even May or something like that. So I got a call one Friday, and we were in the middle of one of our secretaries was having a retirement dinner, and so I couldn't make out the person's name. I said, well, I'll call him back later on. So I called back after the party, and they said, can you come down to Washington for an interview? So I was like, sure. So I came down, and I would say by August of 2004, the process was pretty much settled, but I didn't really start till the end of September because my wife and I had just signed a lease for a new apartment, and the owner was giving us a hard time where if I couldn't find anybody for it, he was going to make, what was it, like 3 months cancellation. And I'm not going to pay 3 months cancellation. So that made me put off my start time until September. But for the defense, now that did take a long time. I was in between jobs. I had just got laid off from AARP. They had a massive layoff. And so what happened was a lady who I knew from the Paralegal Association. She works for the Pentagon. She saw my half-completed outline on LinkedIn, and she said, "Can you come down to the Pentagon for an interview?" I says, "No problem." So I came down. That was, I think it was like July of 2009. Now, if they had told me that the security clearance that was going to take forever, I did not. I'm thinking I'll know something released by the fall. But since I didn't realize I was going for a secret clearance, which they go through everything, your credit, they interview people that you've gone to school with, teachers, neighborhood, some family members, you name it. And naturally, with me being unemployed, my credit kind of took a hit at the time. So then I had to explain why my credit score went down to the investigators. And finally, everything was finished like August of 2010, which is like 15 months or whatever. So it was a long perseverance process. But now I understand the process is shorter now, thank God. Because, I don't know, prayer was the only thing that got me through that long process.
Does that resonate with you as well, Chris?
I had a very unique experience, and this is, I want to say it is absolutely not representative of how probably most people get into the federal sector, but it's one of those things I don't want, especially anybody just coming out of the paralegal program, to think that because they don't have much experience or because a job posting says, I want 5 years experience, that if you don't have those things, you're not going to get in, because I got crazy lucky. So at the time, I'd been working for a company called Integrity. It's actually the parent company to USIS, who Isabel works for. As a corporate paralegal, I've been there roughly, not even a year yet, maybe about 10 months. It was January of 2011. I had signed up for an online intelligence community job fair. Looked on there, wasn't really anything I was qualified for. It was more intelligence analyst, that type of thing. So I literally looked around for a minute on the job fair, got offline, nothing. So a month later, the FBI sent out just a mass-generated email to everybody who had signed up for that job fair. Said, hey, we're the Bureau, we weren't part of this job fair, but we have jobs if you're interested. Answer this little questionnaire, and, it was, you listed your major, what field you work in. And they're like, okay, great, and then, are you a felon? Have you done any, crazy drugs, all this stuff? I'm like, no, like, great, I need all this. It's just a mass-generated questionnaire. Mind you, this is maybe February now. Answered that. They're like, okay, great, you're not a felon, you're not a drug dealer, send us your resume if you want. And I was like, okay, well, this is going into some abyss. Sure, I'll send you my resume. June, I get a cold call with a conditional job offer from the Washington field office. It just so happened at the time, this was right before we had that huge budget shutdown. They were doing a mass hiring surge, and they were hiring people like nobody's business because they still had money at the time, and they needed to get people in the door before everything got shut down. My resume went across the right person's desk at the field office. There just happened to be an opening for a paralegal position there. And I got this cold call. I'm at work, and I'm like, either this is the luckiest day of my life, or somebody just stole all of my information, and this is going to go south really fast. So that was June 16th. I remember the day. And they were fast-tracking clearances at the time. I mean, they had investigators beating feet. Like he said, they comb through everything. They go through your neighbors. They go back to your college. They talk to family members. They go to all your bosses. They showed up at the job I was currently working unexpectedly. That's really fun, especially when you haven't told them that, hey, I'm leaving. That was mortifying. The guy calls me, he's like, I'm 15 minutes away. I was like, well, I guess I better go tell the general counsel. This is going to be bad. But that was, so conditional job offer in June. They were doing all of the background clearance, full scope polygraph. That's really fun. During the summertime, and then I started on the 26th of September. So I had 3 months that my background, everything went through. Mind you, I had only been out of college about 2 years at the time, not even, so my life was pretty boring because I'd either been in school or working, and when I was in school, I was also working, so I didn't have too much time to get into much trouble, so thankfully that worked in my favor. But, like I said, don't be discouraged if, you know, don't not apply, don't not sign up for a job fair, because you never know when it's gonna be your lucky day, and I got super fortunate that I had mine.
So I've got like 3 different experiences that I can talk about, because when I was first hired, I was a student intern at my current office, and I was there for a semester. I did a very good job, and I listened to everybody who was leaving soon, and I was like, I can probably do some of these jobs. And so I kept in touch with a lot of these people, and very quickly, when graduation came around, I started to email, hey, has so-and-so left? Do you all need another language assistant? Because we have a public hotline, and we talk to about 5,000 people a year, and we get anywhere from, can I talk to Mr. Obama, to, I actually need help right now, I'm about to lose my job, kind of calls. And so they needed people to sort of man the hotline and do a lot of the outreach work. And I knew that I could maybe get in that way, but they were not hiring permanently. The Civil Rights Division tends to be one of those divisions that gets targeted for budget cuts, no matter what the administration politically may be, because you know, depending, one may not want to fund it too much, one doesn't want to fund it at all. It depends on what the political landscape may mean, that our budget is just maybe the same budget that we had in 2009 still. And so contractors are used a lot to sort of fill in these gaps. And so that's how I came in the first time. I was an undergrad, then a few months later I came in as a language assistant, and then we had the budget crash, all the fights, all of those issues, and so I had to go. A year later, the budget stuff seems to be a little bit better, midterm elections go through, everybody's like, everything's gonna be fine, and so they start to rehire people, and I got hired as a paralegal. As I was doing this paralegal program at GW, I get hired as a paralegal contractor, and so I go back to the same office. So I've been sort of back and forth to this place, and this specific place, because once you get into OSC's law and you begin to sort of, you know, it's very hard to leave it, and it's also very hard in a very small office to get up to speed very quickly. So if they know that you know exactly what you're going to do on day one, they will push for you to come back. And so if you ever need an internship, and we do take paralegal interns now, because I started to be like, you know, those programs exist around here, and these people need internships, and so by all means, email me. I will, you know, we need interns all the time. We're very small. And so that was my third time around, was still as a contractor. My office got authorization to hire paralegals. So I'm sitting in a contractor position, and I was able to apply to my position back in May. And this Friday was when I got my interview for this tomorrow Friday. And so that was my process, and I've been at this office for 2 years, and for 2 years I've been hearing, we're trying, you know, they don't want you to leave once you're doing good work for them. Most federal offices are strapped, it doesn't matter where you are anymore, what department you're in. When people leave, it's very hard to get another person in that spot. And so you have, I think, a better chance, you just need to get your foot in the door. So even if it's an unpaid student internship when you're an undergrad, or if it's an unpaid paralegal internship, make them see your work, because they will remember you. You have to keep that network going, otherwise it's going to be a little bit more difficult, because even if you apply to a USA Jobs thing, it may just go into the abyss, because they all of a sudden...
It oftentimes does,
yeah,
but not always, but yeah.
And from the perspective of somebody who's in the office that's also hiring, you are at a staff meeting where they're saying things like, we were able to post it, we posted it for a week, they got 44 people, then they cut off our funding again. Like, you hear the internal things that I wouldn't otherwise be privy to, because I just happened to be in the office I'm trying to apply to get into. And so I was lucky to finally get an interview. I hope that it goes well tomorrow. But you never know. I mean, it may be that December 11th, when they don't pass or do pass another continuing resolution, I may no longer have that conditional offer. And you know, right, and it's sort of, you know, depending on your agency, depending on your division within the agency, your budget battles are different. And so I'm lucky to be in an office where I'm learning a lot, because when you don't have a lot of people, you get to do all kinds of things. When they don't have an attorney to write back to Senator whoever, they're like, Isabel can do it. And fine, I'm happy to write that congressional letter, because that is a very high profile thing that all of a sudden my manager gets to see my writing. And so, you know, if you're able to get in, even if it is as a contractor, and they will then start pushing for you and gunning for you to get in there, because they don't want to lose you. It's very frustrating for the people who are in there, who are career people who need folks that believe in government, that want to do work for, you know, these agencies. It's hard for them to see this weird process where you're like, I can see you, you're here, you're doing this work, and I want to get you in here, and it's not always up to them. And so it's just a matter of get work however you can get it, and start from wherever you need to, so that you can kind of get your face time with whatever office you want. So that's my best advice that I can give.
The way I got my job is I just went on USA Jobs and I submitted my resume into this, and I didn't think twice about it. I thought, well, whatever, I had nothing to do that night, and I just, this was back during when they had the KSAs and you had to write paragraphs.
Oh, Lord.
Writing and I'm sitting out on the back deck under the stars, and I just hit submit, and a couple of months later, I got the same thing. I got some unknown person, 202. I was like, who would be calling me?
U.S. government.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh God,
And so I listened to the message. I didn't even listen. A couple hours later, I just listened to the voicemail. Who could that be? And I was like, hi, we want to interview you. Give us a call. I was like, wow. I didn't expect that. So I did, and the process was actually pretty quick for me. I mean, they interviewed me over the phone. I think I had a second interview over the phone, and then they asked me to come in. I called Tony. I was like, guess what? I've got an interview. She was like, great. And I said, you know, but I really don't want to start working until like a couple months from now, because I want to just start immediately. If they offer you a job immediately. I was like, okay. And I did. I came down to the Federal Trade Commission right over here on Pennsylvania Avenue, and I was interviewed by the head of the program at the time, Julie Mack, who was an amazing attorney, and then I was interviewed by a couple of the other paralegals that were in the program, and I just went away. It was very quick. I mean, you know, I was, you know, in the private sector, sometimes it goes on and you have committees and things like that, but that was it. I went away and I didn't hear anything from them, and I wasn't particularly positive about it. I thought, everybody seemed sort of like stone-faced about the whole thing. Nobody said, when can you start, or anything like that. And then I just got another unknown phone call about a week or two later from another 202 number. I thought, who could that be? And they said, hi, we'd like to offer you the position, and these are your start dates. And I came down, and it was, you know, they mail you a package, you had to fill out a bunch of things, and just exactly what everybody else said. I was on the board of my condo building at the time, and I got this sort of like snide comment from my manager that says, like, if you know federal agents are going to be coming around, I was like, I didn't really know that federal agents are going to be inquiring at my
they
management
don't tell
office.
you.
Yeah.
And they don't tell you who they're going to talk to.
They just show
Exactly.
up.
They just
And it just, and that's my story. You know, I'm one of the people that didn't know anybody on the inside. I didn't have anybody gunning for me. I didn't know anything. I just went submit and went whatever. In case sirrah, sirrah. And it worked out.
So Mary, you did it without networking, and you had
Right.
somebody look at your LinkedIn. How much networking
Yeah,
goes?
that's interesting. He had LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And you had applied to a job fair, so your name was on a list,
Right.
and they reached out to you. So
Well,
all
yeah,
got
but
different
it
things.
wasn't that they purposefully targeted me. It was just a
Right,
mass
but you had
generated
put your
email,
name
and yeah, it just
Yeah.
it was luck of the draw. I mean, so there's really no, you know.
Well, it's do everything. I
blessed
think
off
it's
route of like, this is how you
Comes,
get in, it's just, yeah.
I think it's like get your LinkedIn profile up to speed.
Yeah.
Sign up for job fairs,
Yeah.
like wherever they are.
Because the lady who
And
saw
try to
the-
get to know people.
And
Because that are gonna be
they
good
are
for you.
hiring, it's just whether or not they can put something out. The bureaucracy, depending on your agency, it's, even if my boss wants to hire me tomorrow, that's not happening tomorrow.
Exactly.
You know, and one thing I should say for the federal contractors, it's been my experience that it is a shorter process, because you're working for your company, you're not working for the agency. So I'm just on loan from USIS Labatt to the Civil Rights Division. So I have these two bosses, my timesheet goes through my company, all of my benefits come through my company. And you'd be surprised actually at how they're not as good as federal government job benefits, but you do get something depending on what company you choose, and there are a lot of them. And so, I was sort of able to bypass some of the processes, and maybe I shouldn't say bypass, I don't want to get in trouble, but, it seems to have been a shorter length of time between my being told by my company, you're hired, and my start date than other folks. So right now, we've hired 3 attorneys in my office. They hired them in June. They do not start until December. So that gives you, and that's for attorneys, because they're not paralegals. There's different standards and things like that, but and different clearances. I only have a public trust clearance, which you can do in 6 weeks if you've got the right people. It's not. We don't have clearance things. Most of our stuff is on our website. Like, it's not the same level of litigation that we do, or things that we need to know is not something that you hear in the office.
So Isabel and Mary are both, as they said in their intros and through the discussions, they're both graduates of the program. So I'm curious, from your experience in the program, and you touched on it, I think both of you touched on it, you talked about writing, and Mary, you talked about research. Can you talk about what were the most relevant skills that you developed through the program? And for Kristen and Anthony, can you talk about, for our students who are listening in, some of the things that they should focus on if they want to go to your agency or some of the other agencies that you've been through? What are the most critical skills in your role?
Well, in our agency, definitely, pretty sure you know that legal research, because you're going to be on Westlaw, Lexis a lot, and there's also different research software that the government has. I mean, that they'll train you on, but when you come in, you're expected to know, like, how to go on Westlaw. They'll supply you a password, and if you need a refresher, there's always some representative from Westlaw, Lexis who comes by, and usually they'll come to your office, or I know when I was at DOJ, I think Lexis had a satellite office somewhere. We would go off-site to, and writing is critical too, because in our agency, writing is important because we're dealing with classified information, and you have to be specific what you need, because we deal with a lot of FOIA requests, which is Freedom of Information Act. So when people send in a FOIA request, sometimes they don't know what they're asking for, but
They're crazy looking.
they're crazy. I know you look at them like, huh?
I want everything.
I want everything on me.
And then they expect it like 7 days. I'm like, you have several thousands of documents. I cannot get that to you in 7 days. So we have to decide what to send them, what to redact. I'm glad that I remember first years ago when they didn't have redacting programs. I'm glad they do have them now. Here you go. We have a program in Adobe that can redact it. Yeah, because like before, I used to, I think when I started, I know I have over 20 years experience. When I started before, they used to just like put redaction tape on it, but now I'm glad that we evolved from that. And well, we don't get to interview too many people. I mean, mostly I'm dealing with different government agencies. Like I'm calling over to somebody like an NSA or all the other security agencies, because I kind of missed that interviewing clients, because we did that a lot with DOJ. But I would say the main things for our unit is good writing skills, research, and be a good listener.
I did my paralegal program at the other University just down the road in Georgetown. But this is a fantastic I know many people who went here as well, and I know this is a fantastic program, but I think across the board, your fundamental paralegal skills are, you know, that really you will always fall back on those. Legal research, as Anthony said, is huge. Writing, I know in my particular position, we open our own case files and we're constantly submitting documents for review. And you don't know who's going to necessarily see them. So your writing skills need to be up to par. I know my supervisor in particular, he's a nitpicker. I mean, he wants, you know, your punctuation, everything to be, you know, to be there. So, you know, that you can, you know, draw a logical conclusion, do it in, you know, a brief, you know, paragraph as opposed to long things and everything like that. You know, and writing skills are definitely, I would say for me, is the biggest thing I fall back on.
Yeah, so one thing that I did learn to do really well, because I was working full-time and did this program full-time, was that I learned to be organized. Like, and it helps me a lot today, because I no longer have my program, but it is rare the day that I can start a project and finish in the same day at the same time with no interruptions. And in an office that, when it's my day to pick up the hotline, I have to be writing up a settlement agreement and then answer 3 calls about different things all at once. And so you sort of learn by having to, a lot of us end up having full-time jobs and also doing this program. So you learn to sort of pick up where you left off. And that's a skill that you have to practice, and you have to be able to be the person who knows the historical context of something, because your attorneys will not always remember, and it's not going to be their fault. And that's just, you know, it's just the culture of your job is to know everything so that they can do their job a lot faster and more efficient. And so in a day where I am being asked about the 35 declarants for this, I also may have to do a webinar presentation to a completely different audience than who I was just talking to. And so those kind of skills and the experience of other people was very valuable to hear. And this program is so diverse, and you get sort of a wide range of experiences. And not everybody is in government, not everybody is private sector. And so as I was learning certain things, I would go back and say, have you heard of CaseMap? Because you're making me do a lot of work that I shouldn't have to do. You know, and so there are things that my office just didn't realize we had access to. Or there were things that I knew I had access to that at school I didn't have access to. So you then have to have 2 Westlaw accounts, because my law enforcement account, I can get a bunch of other stuff that I really couldn't for school. And so there were these sort of 2 pathways that you get to learn when you're doing this program, and you get a lot of information that your office may have no idea about, or that they just haven't gone back to it, because whoever it was that did the case map and was really good at it isn't there anymore. They've been gone for a while. Nobody remembered that that was available. And so you get to sort of show up a little and say, hey, by the way, my program just taught me how to do this really well, and let me show off to you all this information is now much easier.
They love that.
Yes, they really love
They
that.
love that.
And when you
Yes.
can
Yes.
get to the middle of Iowa and connect to Wi-Fi and get all of your stuff, and your attorneys are like, oh yeah, no, I had to do nothing, and yeah, exactly. That's what you need, because those are the happy days. Those are the days where you go back to this like very laudable email and people are saying, please put Isabel in all of my cases, like that. Those are the things that you want, and those are things that this program sort of allows you windows into things that you are not working on, but you will one day need to work on, and so I think that alone is very, very valuable, and it was very helpful to me to be able to, you know, come back and forth.
One of the things that I found invaluable from the paralegal program at George Washington University was the research and writing program that was taught by Larry Ross. That's his name, right? It's been a couple of years. And he is amazing in that he has a planned class, every class where he is teaching you something specific about the Blue Book. And if you do not get trained by Larry Ross on Blue Booking, I don't think you know how to do it. And
Yes.
I have been relied upon many times. A lot of the paralegals that come in to the Honors Paralegal Program at the Federal Trade Commission, they don't have to have a a paralegal certificate, and they don't have to have paralegal experience. They have to have at least a 3.0 in whatever they graduated in undergraduate. You can also have that as well. If you don't have the 3.0, there's certain combinations. But most of them did not know how to blue book, and so when large agency reports are going out, and you would get a project, and just like I was referring to earlier, an attorney would put in a paralegal request, and it would say, I need somebody to blue book and site check this document, and I knew how to do that. Although I wasn't perfect at it, I knew my way around the blue book, because Larry really does teach that very thoroughly. And I recommend it to anybody, even if you're not going to go through the whole program, you want to be a paralegal, that's a great skill, because a lot of attorneys, like you said, it's been years where they didn't focus on that, and they want somebody else to handle that piece. And if you can do that, it's very specific. So that's the one thing that stands out in my mind, is that particular class as being really valuable.
And he also makes you realize you have librarians.
Oh yeah, I know
Like,
that.
our entire Justice Department has several librarians who are amazing at their jobs. And so when it just, you have this reminder, there's somebody that knows better, and I'm not gonna guess, And so that was another way of having different professors sort of remind you of different things.
May I add something?
Yeah.
Librarians are your best friend.
Yeah.
I have used librarians so many times when I'm trying to find out where to mail a form or something that we need to file in California, and because of the resources that have been cut out in California, sometimes you can't get through to who you need to. I call the law library or the public library near that city, and I say, I need to find out this, that, or the other thing. Librarians are your best friend. Recently, there was a mass email that was sent out by an attorney at the Federal Trade Commission, because they do advertising practices, unfair advertising practices, and he wanted to get the actual magazine from like 10 years ago so that he could go through it and see what the actual advertisement was. So you couldn't go on Lexis or Westlaw because there's just articles there. And I just thought about it, and because we have a thing that goes out to all attorneys and investigators with just a question, so that anybody can chime in and try to help out. And I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna, he didn't ask me specifically, but I just shot off a little email to the Library of Congress. If you go onto the website there's a thing where you can submit a question, a research question. It wasn't gonna be 5 minutes later, but about a day or two later, they said, yes, we have this, that, and the other thing. And I just forwarded it on to that particular attorney, and I'm assuming he has what he needs now. So don't forget about librarians and libraries. I work with some attorneys that I haven't been to the library in years, but these people have a lot of knowledge, and Larry obviously has a master's in library science as well as a JD, so it was great having this class.
Yeah, they're actually meeting tonight, so I'll send them a copy of this.
I'll
And they were disappointed. They gave us one of their other classes to go to law firm, so they definitely want to see this information. So, and I think he'll appreciate that glowing endorsement. So that's great. So I have a whole list of questions here, but I know that our folks in the room, and I think you guys did a great job to answer a couple other questions that were on my list. But do we have questions from here in the room?
Yeah. Okay. This question is for the whole panel, but specifically Ms. Ontario.
Yes.
When you said something about your organization, how do you best organize when you have competing priority dates?
So,
in the federal government, you may have your first line supervisor and your second line supervisor, and then you have the head of the agency. Okay, and they all want things ASAP.
Yesterday.
Yeah,
The day
and
before that.
So my pro tip would be just ask the question before you even. I'll give you a perfect example. At 4:30 today, an attorney sent me a frantic email. I need this settlement agreement, a 3-page settlement agreement, not that long. It's for a particular party. It's not our big settlement agreement with a company. For this lady who's getting $75,000 from a company, she only speaks Spanish. You need to translate this as soon as possible. And so I saw that, and I was like, I'm supposed to be somewhere at 6 o'clock. Even as good as I think I am at translating legalese from English to Spanish, it's going to take me a minute. So I got up, I walked over to Adriana, I was like, hey, what exactly is ASAP? Just give me like a ballpark, do you need this today? Should I call my, because then I have to call my company and say, I will be here past my time, I need permission to stay. Or I will have to call Derek and say, I'm not gonna make it, because I asked that question. And as I am asking that question, our managing attorney comes in and says, did you give Isabel that? And by the way, I want it back. She shouldn't do it. We don't want her to have to, if something happens to the settlement agreement, have to testify and say she translated it and not a company translated it. And the company and the Slater are going to get into a fight about how she didn't understand and she really wasn't supposed to get 75, she was supposed to get something less. They didn't want me in the middle of that. And so it's a matter of just communication. So rather than my frantically starting to draft this settlement agreement, I just got up, went to ask the question, and by the time I got back, my assignment was gone, and I was able to leave on time and make it here. But it's a matter of not just sort of deciding that it doesn't matter what comes to your inbox, you have to do it, because people don't, as good as our attorneys are, they are not always aware of how many other people you're working for, and so it's always good to keep that open line of communication, and I find that a lot of things get lost in translation. You don't always know how the person's feeling when they send you this ASAP frantically. So it's just my walk around the office to ask her if she needed this right away so that I could change my schedule. I wasn't going to say no because I don't have the authority to go say no to my client, which is essentially what she is. But it's just a matter of having very good communication with your attorneys and very good communication with your management, because you can get lost in the fray. And in an office that has 2 paralegals, you also don't want to get this monochromatic looking. I don't always just want to do translations. It's not that I shouldn't do them when they do need to be done ASAP, but if that's the only thing I'm doing, then you shouldn't call me paralegal. And so you have to sort of keep a very open line of communication with your management. And I am one of these list makers. In the morning, my first thing to do is to write down everything I have to get done that day. And if that list looks like it's going to be over, I have to talk to somebody. Because it's not our job to decide what the priority is. That's somebody with a much higher pay grade than us, and it's not up to us. And so if we feel overwhelmed, it's not that it doesn't make you look bad. It makes you look like, oh, she's got it together. She knows what she can handle. And so that would be my my tip is not to just accept all assignments that come your way, because you're only human. You've got other things to do. People don't always know. And if you don't tell them, they're not gonna. It's like being in a very odd relationship where you gotta know what's going on, otherwise it's not gonna work out. So that's my.
And I would imagine the 2 of you have probably interesting competing demands that,
Yes.
that come. How do you juggle those? It's pretty similar to.
When we used to have a team lead on, just at one time our unit, we had 40 attorneys, and we were split up into 6 different teams. Now we're down to 15 attorneys, and right now it's just two paralegals. So I work for the associate deputy counsel. So if one of the other junior attorneys say, hey, I need such and such, right away I ask them, what's the turnaround time for it? And if I'm working on a major project, I'll let them know, well, I'm working on X, Y, Z. Can you wait till this is finished? And if they can't, then I'll say, well, can you check with the other paralegal? And my old supervisor always say, if you feel that you're overburdened, let me know, and then I'll make sure that they go to one of the other people. But you definitely have to have great time management skills, because, as she said, you can't accept everything. Don't say yes to everything, because, everybody knows how to, time commitment is. Because me, I admit, when I first get there in the morning, my first thing is I want my coffee. I was like, don't give me anything major at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock I'm wide awake by then. So, but most of the time, as I was sharing earlier, there's not, in our unit, there's no such thing as a typical day. Because since we're working with defense departments, whatever is pressing that's newsworthy, boom, that may be waiting for me to work on the next day. So if that's major, then say if I'm working on, I don't do translation, but say if I'm working on document production, if something major happened in the news last night, say we're dealing with troops or whatever. And I have to be prepared to work on that. And definitely that gives you, you have to juggle hats and everything, so time management, learn how
Critical skill.
critical skill, learn that.
Write yourself notes. Like really, like there are things on my calendar that say do this 3 hours later because I'm gonna forget, and you have to like find tricks for yourself.
Yes.
I think, she touched on having that open line of communication with your supervisor is huge. I mean, the way that being in law enforcement, we're divided into squads. Mine is the CDC squad, the Chief Division Counsel squad, and I have a kind of a first line supervisor, which is one of the associate division counsels, and then my big boss, if you will, is the Chief Division Counsel. But my first line supervisor is who signs my PAR, which is your annual rating. So when you apply to a job, you have a job description of these are the elements you have to meet, these are the types of jobs that you should be doing as a paralegal. And those are the things that you're actually rated on. That's, whether you get poor or outstanding. So especially, coming, being kind of fresher out of a program, you have, as Isabel was saying, you have all these skills and tools and tricks that, somebody who has maybe been there for 15, 20 years necessarily doesn't have. So you can become kind of a go-to person where, one attorney's like, oh, well, can you just do this or can you just do that? And I do my best to juggle all of those things, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, I have to, my file review is coming up, I have to make sure that I get this meat and potatoes of my job done, and then I'm more than happy to take care of all of these other things that come at you. So it's just kind of being able to focus on that. And a lot of that, my first line supervisor will run interference for me. I can say, hey, Patrick, I need, I'm drowning a little bit in this. I gotta get all this, all this tort claim stuff done, and Annalise is throwing this at me, and Marcy's throwing this at me, and if there's something where it just becomes too overwhelming, he'll go and say, hey, she doesn't need to, organize your office or go through your case files right now. She's kind of got, some more important work to do. So just keep that line of communication with them.
Did you want to add anything to that?
Communications. I generally like at the end of every day, or if I'm working with an attorney, I say, this is what I've done. I usually put a hyperlink, and I say, and it is located here, and there's a hyperlink to what I've been working on. I'm planning to do this tomorrow. And so the attorney now knows where I'm at. If he wants to look at it, he can, or if she wants to look at it, she can see exactly where I'm at and what I'm planning to do the next day if everything goes well. And if I'm off base, then they know where I'm at and they can say what I need to do. So it's all about communications primarily.
And if at any point, like there have been issues in my office with, not with me, but you get to watch these personnel issues turn into bad working days for these folks, because when they stop being able to communicate with their boss, that's where you lose it. Like then there's, your work product is going to be less than you expect it to be because you have nobody running interference for you. You want every once in a while your boss to be like, you gotta go home, like I know what you're working on, you gotta go home, so you want that person to be your sort of buffer to all the attorneys who are gonna want to have you work on their stuff.
And at the Federal Trade Commission, the head of the paralegals program, we meet every week on Tuesday, and he'll say to the group, is anybody having problems? Is anybody doing too much work? And somebody let us know, because we share work amongst ourselves, and we all pretty much know how to do what each other does. Some of us are better at blue booking if they've gone to DWU than others, and some people are better translators or whatever, but we share our jobs, share our work, and our manager really looks out for us. So I really recommend that if you're trying to break into the federal government as a paralegal, that you put a saved search in USA Jobs and do Federal Trade Commission paralegal, because like I said before, you do not have to have you don't have to have any paralegal experience, but they do hire people that do have it. But if you've got a 3.0 grade point average, and they provide lots of training, you do all of the training you were talking about, LexisNexis, you do case map, They send you off to khaki. If there's any project that comes up and you don't know how to do it, they will send you to the training so that you can get up to speed. So it's an excellent way to get in, get yourself 3 or 4 years of good paralegal experience and move on.
Are they hiring?
There's not like a listing right now, but they're hiring every year. They hire a new batch of paralegals because it is a term appointment that starts at 14 months, and then they can renew it up to 4 years, at which point you time out. So it's not the case, as in some other agencies, where you get a job as a paralegal, and now that person's gonna be there for the next 4 years, and that position is never gonna come up in your lifetime.
Yeah.
So this is a program that I think was originally designed for attorneys who, not for attorneys, but for recent college graduates who were thinking about becoming attorneys. So it was a way to get some people in, get 2 or 3 years experience, and then if you had decided to go on and become an attorney, you could, and if not, you could go off and do something else. So it's a great place to start. I really recommend that you go to USA Jobs and put that in there, because like I said, I had no actual paralegal experience. I did have experience in the program, and I was hired, and I know who I'm working with. Some people are recent graduates out of an undergrad program who have no work experience and no paralegal experience, and some have 5 or 6 years paralegal experience or have been in the program. Gina was in the program, Gina Piccarelli. She is also an honors paralegal at the Federal Trade Commission, and she was at the GW program as well. So it's a wide mix of things. So I really recommend that you, and and don't just limit it to paralegals, because what I've discovered being there and doing research on usajobs.gov is that also sometimes investigators are also positions that do very similar things to paralegals. They do research, they do financial research, they put together declarations. So it used to be a pathway. Like if you were an honors paralegal, you would then, if you wanted to go on, you could apply for the investigator's jobs. So that's another keyword that you can, type into your USA Jobs and to use to apply your paralegal experience or training.
For the Civil Rights Division, investigator is not investigator, it's equal opportunity specialist, just in case.
Okay.
And that's how it will come up. And but that is what they do, they investigate, equal opportunity. Yeah, and so that's a term that if you don't know, you don't know, but.
The job will never come up.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And they go all the way up to, I think, GS 13. And they, in our office, they get treated almost as if they were attorneys. So up until the moment where you have to negotiate, that investigator has taken, some of our investigators get the credit for some of our highest settlements. That's another thing. Most people, if you're looking for litigation, you want to be in different places in the government, because most people do not want U.S. versus their company for a civil rights violation, so we settle a lot. It's very unlikely that that company's gonna, for some principled reason, just because their attorney's gonna be like, you do not want that Google search. You do not want that for your company. It's not good for you. It's not, you violating people's rights is not a thing that you want associated with your company. But it does have, sometimes we do go, but, it's just, sorry, that was off track. But
that is exactly right. The first case I went to was down in Tampa, but it was being handled out of the Cleveland office, so I got to work with a bunch of folks from Cleveland who are the nicest people on the planet. And they had been at the agency for over 20 years. These were people that had a lot of experience at the FTC, and this was their first actual trial because, like Isabel said, people do not actually go to trial with the federal government. They usually settle. So, but you still have to go through all of the motions of putting together the briefs and putting together the exhibits and compiling all of the research and so that they can see your opposing counsel can see whether it's worth going on. And this is just one tip I would like to give people who are interested in a specific agency or in a specific type of legal work. And I do it. I'm interested in international money laundering, and so I Google that once in a while. And sometimes just a normal article will come up, like in the New York Times or the Post or something, and there'll be a link to the case. And you can click on that. And this, you don't need Lexis or any of that, you can click, or you can go to the local court, whether it's the Southern District of New York or whatever, and you can get this document, and you can look and see, can I produce this document? This is the brief, can I, it's numbered over, do I know how to do that? And you look at the footnotes, do I know what these footnotes mean? If I had to generate this, could I do this? And oftentimes in the briefs, there's declarations by the investigators, by the paralegals, and it will say, point by point, I did this, I collected financial statements, I analyzed them, I then turned them into an exhibit, and it tells you. And if you go down this list, this is what you need to know how to do to perform this job. And so you can find out very specifically the skills that you need to do by following the agency or the type of law that you are interested in, and look at those declarations. Print them out and
That's great.
checklists.
Yeah. So burning questions.
Oh, it's more of a comment. I've been taking notes, and I have a lot of comments. But my first comment is this, and I will just make one comment. But what I really noticed was very interesting and very cool and neat is the pride that I saw in each of you as you described your agency and what you do. I think that's special. I mean, I feel like it's exciting and unique. It's something that I think is unique to people who work for the federal government. When you work for the federal government, you feel a pride. I think you feel, first of all, pride in just working for the federal government.
Yes.
Because as much as bureaucrats get that rep, it's really the best people that go to work for the government. I mean, a lot of people want to work for the government, and so they can choose the best. And so I'm sure there are deadbeats out there. I'm sure there are. But for the most, right, anyway. But for the most part, they really get the best of the best. And so people that work there are good, and they're and then to add to it, not only is it a good job and there's good people, but there's a mission.
Yes.
And so you're not just going in and punching the clock and doing your work. You have a mission, and each one of you talked a little bit about your mission, and I think that brings something very special to your workday. Because I got to do this job, and I have to do this task, and I have to do this other thing, but it's bigger than that. I'm doing this task because we're going to war against ISIS, and I need to get this done so that this can happen. Right, so it's much bigger. I'm protecting the United States. So that's just an observation. I think it's really, it's exciting and unique and wonderful. I think it makes federal work special in that respect. And then just one other quick observation, when you were talking about the ways that you got your jobs, a lot of you said, well, I was just lucky because I did this, and I was, just so happened to do this, and I just happened to be, you could call it luck, but I call it being really prepared. I mean, you went to that job fair, and then they sent you the questionnaire, and you completed it, and then you sent off your resume to the events.
Hard work meeting opportunity.
Exactly.
Yes.
It sounds like luck, and this lady happened to know you, and you were doing an internship, and you went and you just filled that out, but you made it sound like, oh, I just filled it out, but then you talked about, I had to do the knowledge, skills, and ability, and I had to write a whole paragraph, and you did some work there. You weren't just. So,
Sounds easy now, but
it sounds easy now.
a lot of cussing.
How quickly they forget the pain.
Yeah.
Cussing over the kids.
But, I would just say that the lesson to take from that is be there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do stuff.
Yes.
So, for example, you said equal opportunity specialist. It's not called an investigator. So all of us here
Right.
now know that. And the people who aren't here don't know that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that's what we get for showing up, plus the brownies. But so you get that little secret tip or your tip. I mean, these are good things to know. So those were observations, not questions.
And I think along Tony's point too, the mission, how much of that plays into, if you're interviewing somebody, how much of that is part of the interview process? And I know with another agency that comes and recruits from campus, that's the driving forces. We want people who are passionate about the mission, their values align with our mission. Does that play into the interview process, I would imagine?
I'd say big time, with my particular agency, being law enforcement, especially in being at the field office where it is operational, where the people you say every day in the halls are going out and literally getting the bad guys. I mean that's huge. feel a huge sense of pride working for the FBI, and I feel I'm very biased now for my law enforcement agency as opposed to we always kind of have this sibling rivalry with ATF and DEA and all this other stuff.
Metaphorically,
Metaphorically, exactly.
Where's the song?
Secret Service has got us in hockey, but there's always that. But it's one of those things where I feel, as you stated, it's easy to, from the day-to-day tasks, you can get bogged down and okay, well, I have to do this brief and now I have to, work on this claim. But when something happens, like for example, I was there for the Navy Yard shooting. When all of a sudden, somebody comes and calls you and is like, we need all hands on deck now. I need you to get out, emergency subpoenas, full records, everything else. It is everybody at the office drops everything and is like, okay, we are now all dedicated to this one purpose, and that's something that's very special. And I would say in the interview process, they are looking for somebody who is, has that passion, has that desire of like, okay, I'm not just looking to punch that clock from 9 to 5. I'm here to serve a bigger purpose than just, what your job on a day-to-day basis may.
I just have a question for Anthony Gracie, just as one who has been
That's my wife.
for almost 20 years now. So what kind of advice would you give someone? I mean, you've been doing this for quite a long time. So what kind of advice would you give students in terms of pursuing this for, that long a period of time and the various things that you've done over the course of that 20 years? I think that, because I don't know that there are very many people that have been doing it, for that long and have found it that rewarding. So why don't you speak to
Well, definitely dedication. Because true, there's some people who may only want to be a paralegal for like 3 years and then want to go to law school. Because when I was at DOJ, I know most of the paralegals who worked along with me, they were only here like 3 years, and then they were like, I'm only here until I save up money for law school until I get in. But as I started my paralegal career back in Philadelphia, I had what they call I was working for the city agency, so they were called legal assistants there. So after working for that for 3 years, I decided to go back to finish my degree. In the program I went to, the college, they had a bachelor's in paralegal study. There was an ABA approved, program. I was like, oh, great, best of both worlds. So going through that, when I graduated from there in 2003, I was like, okay, I want something more than just working for municipal government, because at the time, they were in the beginning of a 5-year wage freeze, and I was making like peanuts back then. I was like, no, I still want to be a paralegal, but I'm not at this salary. So that's when I had always looked at USA jobs, and I was like, well, I didn't see anything I wanted. But at the time that I saw this particular job, it was dealing with housing and civil enforcement, which is part of the civil rights unit. And I was dealing with the housing agency in Philadelphia. I mostly dealt with community housing, transitional housing. So I remember I was joking with my wife. I says, I know nothing about fair housing and civil rights. She said, well, you're always an activist, apply for it. I'm like, do you really think I'm going to get this job? So, like I said, it was in February of 2004 when I applied. And it's funny because I didn't want to fax the stuff from work, so I had my wife fax it from home. And you want me to share this part there? Okay. And I think it was the last day or next to the last day. It was one key piece that she forgot to send. And I'm like, oh my God. And I know how the government is about what they ask for, they want. I'm like, I'm saying to myself, I can kiss that goodbye. So when she was scared, she told me she forgot. And so she called the person, I can't remember who the contact person was, and they were like, oh, sure, you can still fax it in. So I'm like, whew, But going through that process, because it was funny, as looking at USA the job, because I had never envisioned moving to the D.C. area. Yeah, not that I always thought I was gonna always be in Philadelphia all the time, but I just, when we knew that we were gonna move eventually, but we were looking at places like, working for government in like Atlanta or Charlotte area, but coming to DC, I would say, opened up a lot of career opportunities for me, and I remember meeting Tony in one of our in-Kappa functions, that was how many years ago, but I would say I really networked a lot being in the DC area. Just always be available, I need to, since I work with defense, I don't get a chance to network too much now, because I have to be careful what I say to people now. But make sure you network, the different, and Kappa has good events.
Mention a couple of your opportunities, because you had a couple you had to plug in.
Yeah, I served, because when I served on for the DC bar for the lawyer disciplinary committee. They have committees where it's, I think it's like 10 teams, where you have 2 attorneys and you have 1 layperson. And what you do is you hear cases with attorney disbarment. And they're usually like, they can range anywhere from a day to, I think my longest case was like 3 days, I think. And then you actually get to help write the opinion. You bounce the opinions back between the 2 attorneys and yourself. And then the opinion is sent to the DC bar, and either they'll send it back, say, well, no, I don't think you applied the law right in this one, go back and research more. And then once it's finalized, it's put on the website of the DC bar. That, to me, that was great, because I felt like I was being a mediator.
That's a great experience.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that. That is a
Yeah,
great experience.
the DC bar, because what happened was I was working with AARP at the time, and one of the attorneys there, she
She's
knew
right
that I
next
was,
door to it, right?
yeah,
She's right across the street from
Yeah.
the Village Records, right?
yeah,
right
one of
down
the
there.
attorneys knew that I was kind of interested in mediation, and she referred me, so, I think the ladies at the DC bar, Ryan's right, the name escapes me. Anyway, so I sent my resume to her, and we did a phone interview, and then, I think it was like 2 months later, I got a welcome letter, said, welcome, you've been selected, and you get a 2-year term with the option of 3 terms, so I've done my 6 year. Yes.
Mr. Anthony, do DOD paralegals have to go through basic training, or are they civil?
No, well, we do have, one of the paralegals, she is a former gunnery sergeant in the Marines, but no, they're civilians. Matter of fact, our unit, most of the attorneys are civilians. We have a couple JAG attorneys there.
Okay.
But I would say 90% of the attorneys, like, either they're fresh out of law school, or some have come from law firms, and we have one that came from a public interest law. But it's diverse, because when I came for the interview with DOD, I didn't know anything about, I knew where the Pentagon was, but I didn't know anything about military law or anything like that. Close as I came to. I know. I knew where the building was, I have a funny story about that, how I know what the Pentagon looks like. Anyway.
What shape is it?
Yeah. But the closest I came to the military was being the son of an Army surgeon. And then I have nephews who've been in the service. But working for the Defense Department is giving me appreciation of what the military does. I've never downgraded the military. I was like, I would just have more of appreciation of what they do, and it kind of grieves me when I see how people treat veterans, so like cavalierly. Did you have
No, I was waving goodbye to.
I think it's great that she brought up how, I was one of those when I started this program where I was like, I'm totally going to law school, I'm just going to do this for a while. And you realize that, and part of the thing for law school for me was because I really wanted to help people. And I landed in the Civil Rights Division. How more helping can I,
Yeah.
You sort of realize that you really can have an actual career, and I think it's great that you've been able to transition from different departments too, because that, especially just being somewhere that's so specific, it seems sometimes really daunting. And one of the ways in which my office, I'm very proud, like the whole thing about the mission, because we have a public hotline, we get sometimes that like very nice compliment from an actual taxpayer who's like, thank you for helping me get my job back. That kind of immediate gratification from people it helps for you to sustain a mission when every once in a while, we all read the news, the federal government's not always well liked, and so, you don't, it's not as thankless a job as people sometimes think it is, and so, and I think it's great to hear from people who have been doing it so long, because it makes it feel like I picked a good thing to do, so.
Well, so I want to give our folks in the room some time to interact with you guys, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. And I was looking at my phone over here. I wasn't being rude. I was seeing if we had any questions coming from the folks who are streaming. I didn't have questions, but I had 2 thank you emails, so people are listening. I said thank you so much. This is incredibly informative. So on behalf of the folks in this room and obviously everybody who's online streaming the event, thanks so much for taking time out of your day, come down here, and the fact that you're here at 7+ o'clock, still very passionate and smiling, talking about your work. I mean, I think it is a true testament to what Tony said. So thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being here this evening. And with that, we'll go ahead and close things out and give you guys a chance to interact out here. So thank you.
That's good.
And Scott is here with refreshments. So
You guys don't get anything.
Before you all leave, I'd like to